Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I have a story to share, one that changed my life forever. My name is Natalie, and this is how I learned that the person you love the most can be the one who takes you for granted the worst. I met Ryan in my early 20s, and when I say we were inseparable, I mean it. The kind of love people write about, the kind that makes you believe in forever. Late night drives, deep conversations, and dreams so big we could barely contain them. When we got married, it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. We had plans, traveling, starting a family, building a life together. And for a while, it was perfect. But, life has a way of shifting beneath your feet without you even noticing. At first, the changes were subtle. Ryan would come home later and later, always distracted, always tired. I told myself it was just work stress, that I needed to be patient. So I was. I did everything a supportive wife should do. I cooked, I listened, I gave him space when he needed it. But space turned into distance, and distance turned into something else. One night, I decided to surprise him with dinner. His favorite meal, candles lit, soft music playing. I wanted to remind him of us, of who we used to be. I sat there, waiting, checking my phone every few minutes. An hour passed, then two. By the time the food had gone cold, I realized he wasn't coming. No call, no text, just silence. He finally walked in past midnight, reeking of alcohol, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been out for hours. I stood up, my heart racing. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. He barely looked at me. "Out," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "Out where?" "Does it matter?" His voice was flat, almost bored. Something in me snapped. "Yes, Ryan, it does matter. I waited for you. I made dinner. I called you. You didn't even have the decency to let me know if you were safe." He let out a slow sigh, like I was exhausting him. "Natalie, you're overreacting. I just needed some time for myself. Not everything is about you." I felt like I had been slapped. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how effortlessly he dismissed me. Like I was nothing. Like I was just some obligation, something he had to deal with. That was the night I knew. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I knew. I had spent years loving a man who no longer saw me, who no longer valued me. And worse, I had let it happen. I stood there in the dimly lit room, my stomach twisted in knots, staring at the stranger my husband had become. And for the first time I wondered, was I fighting for a marriage that no longer existed? The morning after that night, I woke up to an empty bed. Ryan was already gone, leaving nothing but the cold, hollow space beside me. No note, no text. Not even a sign that he had been there at all. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the way he had dismissed me the night before, the way he made me feel like a burden instead of his wife. I told myself I wouldn't let it ruin my day. I got up, made coffee, and tried to go through the motions of my routine. But something had changed. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt suffocatingly silent. And that silence screamed at me louder than any argument ever could. By midday, I still hadn't heard from Ryan, so I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I checked his social media. It had been months since I last felt the need to, but something in my gut told me to look. His latest post was from the night before, tagged at a high-end lounge downtown with some friends I didn't even know he was still in contact with. And right there, at the edge of the photo, was a woman. She wasn't touching him, but she was close. Too close. Her smile was wide, her body angled toward him in a way that made my stomach turn. I clicked through more photos, scrolling faster, my heart pounding harder with each one. There were other nights, other outings, other faces. How long had this been happening? My hands shook as I set my phone down. I wanted to believe it was innocent, that I was just overthinking. But deep down, I knew better. The man who once couldn't go a day without telling me he loved me had slowly become a stranger who barely even saw me. And worse, I had let it happen. That evening, when Ryan finally walked through the door, I was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. The moment he saw me, his shoulders tensed. What's wrong now? He asked, his voice already laced with irritation. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay even. Where were you last night? His jaw tightened. Out with friends. I told you. No, Ryan, you didn't. I reached for my phone and slid it across the table. Is this what out with friends looks like? He barely glanced at the screen before sighing heavily, rubbing his temples like I was some problem he had to solve. Are we really doing this? You're stalking my posts now? I swallowed hard. I wouldn't have to if you were honest with me. His eyes darkened. Honest? You want honesty, Natalie? Fine. I don't want to come home to this every night. The questions, the accusations, the constant need for reassurance. It's exhausting. I felt my breath hitch, but I refused to break in front of him. You mean our marriage is exhausting? For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, in the coldest voice I had ever heard from him, he said, Maybe. And just like that, the last thread holding us together snapped. I sat there, frozen, as his words cut through me like a blade. Maybe. Just one word, but it carried the weight of everything I had been fearing. It wasn't just a rough patch. It wasn't just stress. Ryan wasn't just distant. He was already halfway out the door, and I had been too blind to see it. A heavy silence filled the kitchen, the air thick with something I couldn't quite name. Resentment, regret, or maybe just the undeniable truth. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table, but I forced myself to stay calm. So that's it? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. You're just done? Ryan let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Natalie. I feel like I can't breathe anymore. I felt my stomach drop. You can't breathe? In our marriage? In our home? My voice cracked, but I didn't care. The man standing in front of me wasn't the same man who had once vowed to love me forever. This version of him looked at me like I was a burden, not a partner. I don't know how to fix this, he muttered. I stared at him, waiting, begging for him to fight for us, for me. But he didn't. Instead, he turned away, like he couldn't even look at me anymore. And that's when I felt it. Rage. Rage for every time I had swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. Rage for every time I had made excuses for him. Rage for the nights I stayed up, worrying about a marriage he had already given up on. I pushed back my chair, standing so quickly that it scraped against the tile. You don't know how to fix this? I repeated, my voice shaking. Then let me make it easier for you. His eyes snapped back to mine, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He had expected me to cry, to plead, to beg him to stay, but I refused to give him that satisfaction. I deserve better than a husband who doesn't know if he wants to be here, I said, my heart pounding. So if you want to leave, Ryan, leave. His jaw tightened. Natalie, no. I held up a hand. I'm done. Done waiting for you to remember that you love me. Done making excuses for you. If you want out, go. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression. Hesitation. Maybe even regret. But it was too late. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my hands trembling as I grabbed my phone. My heart was breaking. My world was crumbling. But I refused to let him see me fall apart. Because if Ryan had already decided to stop fighting for us, then I had no choice but to start fighting for myself. I slammed the bedroom door behind me, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had just done what I never thought I could. I told him to leave. But as the silence stretched through the house, suffocating and thick, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea if he actually would. I pressed my back against the door, straining to hear any sign of movement. Was he packing a bag? Walking out? Or was he just sitting there, stunned by the fact that, for once, I wasn't the one chasing after him? Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. And then finally, footsteps. Slow. Hesitant, moving towards our bedroom door. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. Natalie. His voice was soft, but there was something behind it. Something different. I swallowed, forcing myself to sound steady. What? A long pause. Then, I didn't mean it like that. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Didn't mean what? That you're not sure if you want to be with me? That you feel like you can't breathe in our marriage? My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Tell me, Ryan, which part of that wasn't supposed to hurt? Silence. I pushed off the door and turned the handle, yanking it open so fast he took a step back. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, like he had just realized the gravity of what he'd done. But I was past caring. You don't get to do this, I said, my voice low but firm. You don't get to sit here and play the victim. I spent years making sure you never felt alone, never felt unwanted, never felt unloved. And the moment I needed that in return, I stopped, my throat tightening. You just disappeared. His eyes darted to the floor. I didn't. You did. I cut him off. You've been disappearing for months, Ryan, and I kept holding on, hoping you'd snap out of it, hoping you'd see me again. But you never did. I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my gaze. And now? Now you don't know if you want to stay? Fine. I won't make the decision for you. I turned away, forcing myself to keep moving, to keep breathing. Because if I stopped, I knew the weight of everything would crush me. Natalie, wait. His voice cracked this time, desperation laced between the words. I don't want to lose you. I froze, my hand gripping the dresser for balance. A part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to turn around and let him hold me, to hear him say all the things I had been aching to hear for so long. But I had spent too long waiting for words that never came. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I finally answered. Then you should have fought for me before I had to start fighting for myself. And with that, I walked away. The next morning, the air in the house felt suffocating. It was the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was thick with unspoken words, tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. I barely slept the night before, my mind replaying every conversation, every moment that led us here. The way Ryan had stood there, speechless, as I walked away. The way his voice cracked when he said he didn't want to lose me. But most of all, the way I had finally stopped waiting for him to fight for me. I stepped into the kitchen, expecting him to be gone. Maybe I hoped he would be. But there he was, standing by the counter, his hands gripping a coffee mug so tightly, I thought it might shatter. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His hair was disheveled, his eyes hollow. We stood there, neither of us speaking. The weight of everything between us sat like a stone in my chest. Finally, I broke the silence. Did you make a decision? My voice was steady, but inside I was bracing myself for impact. Ryan exhaled, setting the mug down with a soft clink. I don't want to leave, Natalie, he said, but there was hesitation in his tone. I don't know how to fix this. Something inside me snapped. You don't know? My voice rose, the hurt bubbling up so fast I couldn't contain it anymore. Ryan, do you have any idea how many nights I sat awake trying to figure out what I was doing wrong? How many times I convinced myself that if I just tried a little harder, if I just loved you more, you'd come back to me? He flinched but didn't look away. I have fought for this marriage alone, I continued, my voice trembling. I've given everything, and all I've gotten in return is doubt and silence. And now you say you don't want to leave but don't know how to fix it? I shook my head, letting out a bitter laugh. That's the thing, Ryan. You never tried to fix it. You just let it break. He rubbed his face, frustration etched into every line. I didn't mean for it to be like this, he muttered. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I whispered, over and over again. And the worst part? You knew you were doing it, and you just let it happen. Silence stretched between us. I saw it then, the realization sinking into his expression, the weight of what he had done finally hitting him. But it was too late. I took a deep breath, the final decision forming in my mind, solid and unshakable. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I won't keep waiting for you to love me the way I deserve. So if you don't know how to fix this, then don't. I turned away, my heart shattering one last time. And for the first time in years, I walked away knowing I wouldn't look back. The moment I turned my back on Ryan, something in me shifted. It wasn't just the end of a conversation. It was the end of us. I could feel it in my bones, in the finality of my steps as I walked away. The weight of years spent begging for his love, for his attention, for a place in his life that wasn't second to his doubts, lifted off my shoulders. But that weight, it wasn't gone. It had only changed. Ryan didn't chase after me. I don't know if I expected him to, but the silence behind me was deafening. No desperate pleas. No last-ditch effort to make things right. And that alone told me everything I needed to know. I locked myself in our bedroom, my hands trembling as I grabbed the suitcase from the closet. The same suitcase I had packed and unpacked a dozen times in my mind. But this time was real. My fingers moved on their own, grabbing clothes, stuffing them inside with no real order. I wasn't thinking about what I'd need. I wasn't planning for tomorrow. I was running. A knock at the door stopped me mid-motion. "Natalie." Ryan's voice was raw, hesitant. "Please, don't do this." I shut my eyes, gripping the suitcase handle until my knuckles turned white. "I have to, Ryan," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I can't be here anymore. I won't." Silence. Then a deep sigh. "I never wanted it to end like this," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I turned the doorknob and faced him, my heart hammering against my ribs. He looked lost. Finally, he looked as broken as I had felt for years. "But you let it," I said, meeting his gaze head-on. "Every single day that you pulled away. Every time you let me cry myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough for you. Every time you chose to let this marriage crumble, while I was the only one holding the pieces." His eyes glistened, but I didn't care anymore. His regret meant nothing. "I loved you, Ryan," I whispered, voice cracking. "I really loved you. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe I shouldn't have loved you more than I loved myself." I stepped past him, dragging my suitcase behind me. My feet felt like lead, my chest tight with grief. But my resolve didn't waver. I reached the front door, gripping the handle, knowing that once I stepped through, there would be no coming back. "I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for," I said without turning around. "But it won't be me." And with that, I walked out of the house that was no longer a home, the life that was no longer mine. The cold air hit my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Freedom. I didn't look back as I walked down the driveway, the weight of my decision pressing down on me, yet at the same time, lifting me up. The cold night air nipped at my skin, but I welcomed it. I needed to feel something real after years of feeling numb. The suitcase wheels rattled against the pavement as I stepped toward my car, my heart pounding with every step. Just as I reached for the door handle, I heard the front door burst open behind me. "Natalie, wait!" Ryan's voice was desperate now, the panic raw in his tone. "Please, let's talk. We can fix this." I closed my eyes, gripping the cold metal of the car door. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from anger, from exhaustion, from the sheer audacity of his words. I turned around slowly, my expression unreadable. "Fix this," I repeated, my voice eerily calm. "You think this can be fixed?" Ryan looked frantic, his hair disheveled, his breathing uneven. It was the most emotion I'd seen from him in years. "I know I messed up," he admitted, stepping closer. I let my fears, my doubts, get in the way. But, Natalie, I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you." I almost laughed. Now he wanted to fight for me? After years of neglect, of indifference, of watching me break apart piece by piece and doing nothing? "Ryan," I said, shaking my head, "you already lost me." You lost me the first time you made me feel like I wasn't enough. You lost me when you watched me cry and did nothing. You lost me when I begged you to let me in, and you locked me out instead. His face twisted with pain, his hands clenching at his sides. I can do better. I can change. I exhaled sharply, a sad smile tugging at my lips. But I don't want to wait for you to change, I said. I don't want to spend another year, another month, another day hoping you'll love me the way I deserve. I deserve more than maybes and what ifs. Tears welled in his eyes, but I refused to let them sway me. I had cried enough for the both of us. He reached out as if he could physically stop me from leaving, but I took a step back. "Goodbye, Ryan," I whispered, my voice firm. Then, before he could say another word, I got into my car and drove away. As the house disappeared in my rearview mirror, my chest ached, but not with regret. It was grief, the kind you feel when you finally accept that something is over. But beneath the sorrow, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in a long time, I was finally free. And no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let myself feel unwanted again. Walking away from something that no longer serves you is never easy, but sometimes it's the only choice that truly allows you to grow. Natalie's story is a reminder that love should never feel like a constant battle to be seen, heard, or valued. If you find yourself in a situation where your worth is being questioned, ask yourself, how long are you willing to wait for someone to appreciate what they should have cherished from the start? The truth is, people don't realize what they have until it's gone. And by then, it's too late. Natalie learned the hard way that staying in a relationship out of loyalty or fear of the unknown only leads to deeper heartbreak. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's self-respect. And sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away with your head held high, knowing that the right people will never make you question your worth. What do you think about Natalie's decision? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more real-life stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Scylla Reddit Stories to see what happens next. Stay strong and take care.